They threw him to the ground in front of his kids. What the small-town cops didn't know was that the man they just put in cuffs wasn't just another tourist. He was Special Agent Art Coleman of the FBI. This vacation was supposed to be a hard reset, a quiet escape from the pressures of his job and his wife Sarah's busy dental practice. For 1 week, there were supposed to be no cases, no deadlines, and no threats. But someone in this quiet neighborhood had already decided that the Colemans didn't belong. The kids, 12-year-old Leo and 8-year-old Maya, were finally burning off their energy on the lawn of the rental house in Osprey Cove. As Art and his wife, Sarah, unloaded bags from the Ford Explorer, he noticed an older couple walking by. They didn't smile. They just stared. Art gave a practiced, polite nod. He got nothing back. Easy now, Art, he thought to himself. Don't give them a reason. Let it go, Sarah murmured, noticing the exchange. Didn't say a thing. Just then he saw it. The first patrol car, cruising down the quiet street way too slow. The officers' eyes were locked on their house. Then came a second cruiser, which pulled to a dead stop across the street. An officer got out, his hand resting deliberately on his belt. The feeling of being watched, of being targeted, was unmistakable. I'm taking a walk to the mailbox, Art said, his voice low and steady. Let them see I've got nothing to hide. He moved with purpose, hands visible, and gave the officer a nod. The gesture was met with a cold, blank stare. Dad, he's still there, Leo said nervously from the porch as Art returned. Art's eyes scanned the scene. One officer out of the car, one still inside. A textbook containment setup. For what? Unloading groceries? Before Sarah could even find the property manager's number, 2 more cruisers screamed around the corner, cutting off the street and boxing their Ford Explorer in. They weren't responding to a call. They were executing a raid. The flashing lights painted the whole scene in silent, pulsating flashes of red and blue. That's when Sergeant Miller, the older officer who'd gotten out of the first car, finally broke the silence. He didn't ask a question. He barked an order. You on the porch! Get down here! Hands where I can see them! Leo flinched as if he'd been struck. Maya let out a terrified cry and buried her face in her mother's side. Art moved instantly, placing himself between the officers and his family. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. Officer, my name is Art Coleman. There is no need for this. This is our rental home for the week. Miller just smirked, a cruel, dismissive twist of his lips. I'm sure it is, buddy. Now get your hands behind your back. I am a federal agent, Art said, his voice hard as steel, cutting through the tension. My credentials are in the glove box of that Explorer you've boxed in. I suggest he never got to finish. Miller gave a quick nod and the younger officer, Riley, rushed the porch. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed Art, slammed him face first into the porch railing, and drove a knee hard into his back. Art grunted as the air was forced from his lungs. His son's terrified gasp was the last thing he heard before the metallic click of handcuffs bit deep into his wrists. Art! Sarah screamed, fumbling for her phone. I have the reservation. I can prove it. Here. She held the phone out, the screen glowing with the email confirmation. Miller stalked onto the porch, snatched the phone from her hand, and without even glancing at the screen, tossed it onto a patio chair. You can prove it down at the station. He grabbed her arm. You're interfering. Interfering? You're terrorizing my children, she cried as he twisted her arm behind her back and cuffed her right there in front of her sobbing daughter. Art, forced to his knees on the grass now, looked up. He saw Leo standing frozen, trying to shield his crying sister. He saw his wife being treated like a hardened criminal. He saw the smug look on Sergeant Miller's face. In that moment, Art's mind went cold and clear. The anger was there, a white-hot fury, but it was caged behind years of training. He knew they didn't see a family. They didn't see an agent. They saw exactly what the caller wanted them to see, and they had no idea the storm they had just unleashed. The entire street had fallen silent. From behind drawn curtains and screened-in porches, neighbors watched the free show unfold on the Coleman's lawn. No one stepped out. No one said a word. You're making a terrible mistake, Sarah cried, her cheek pressed against the rough wood of the porch, Sergeant Miller's hand holding her down. Our name is on the lease. The paperwork is right inside on the counter. But Miller wasn't listening. He was enjoying himself. On the grass, Art kept his voice low and steady, trying to reach the younger officer, Riley, who had a knee planted firmly in his back. I need you to listen to me very carefully. My name is Special Agent Art Coleman. I am a federal... Sir, you're being detained. You have the right to remain silent, Riley recited mechanically, refusing to even look at him. Near the doorway, Leo, trembling, had his arm wrapped around his little sister. "She didn't do anything," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. Can I just check on my mom?" Miller glanced over at the boy. "Get back inside," he snapped. "But that's my mom." Leo's voice cracked. Art's own voice rose, tight with fury. "Let the boy check on his mother. He's 12 years old. He's not a threat to you." Miller ignored him and turned his attention back to Sarah. "You got ID?" "It's in my purse, inside the house," she shot back, her fear turning to fire. "So is the rental agreement. So is everything you're too lazy to actually check." "Don't you raise your voice at me," Miller warned. "You get to bark orders at me in front of my children, and I don't get to talk loud? You are violating our rights." "We got a call," Miller said, finally offering a reason. "Neighbor reported a break-in, said your Explorer had no plates, said you matched the description." Art couldn't help but let out a bitter, quiet laugh from the ground. "Description of what?" Miller's eyes narrowed. "Of suspicious individuals. Suspicious individuals. The classic catch-all excuse." "Let me guess, Sergeant," Art muttered. "A black family in a nice house. That the description?" Miller didn't answer. The silence was its own confession. "If you are who you say you are," he finally said, "you can sort it out at the station." He hauled Art to his feet. They dragged him toward a cruiser. Art locked eyes with his son. "Leo, don't let them scare you. You stay with your sister. You're in charge until we get back." Leo nodded, tears streaming down his face but trying to stand tall for his dad. As they shoved Art into the back seat, he saw Riley hesitate by the Explorer. "Sarge, the glove box is ajar. Looks like paperwork in there. Maybe I should—" "Leave it," Miller barked without a second glance. "If he's lying, we'll find out soon enough." He didn't want to know, Art realized. The truth would ruin his story. He sat in the back of the cruiser, his heart thudding not from fear, but from a profound, calculated restraint. He'd spent 17 years investigating cops just like Miller, arrogant, lazy, and convinced of their own righteousness. He knew the procedure. He knew the excuses. He'd just never been on this side of the report. He leaned forward. "You are making a career-ending mistake," he told the officer in the front seat. "My credentials, my badge, are in a black leather holder in the glove box. Go check." The officer didn't even turn his head. "We'll sort it at the station." Art leaned his head against the plexiglass divider. He could still see his kids on the porch. Two small, terrified figures growing smaller as the car pulled away. It wasn't just anger he felt. It was a deep, burning shame. Not for himself, but for the lesson his children were learning tonight. A lesson he had tried his entire life to shield them from. The police station was even colder than the outside air. It was the energy of the place. A cold, practiced indifference that told him this was just another Thursday night. They parked him on a hard metal bench in a hallway, wrists still cuffed, and left him there like a piece of forgotten luggage. This time they had arrested the wrong man, and soon every single person in this building was going to know it. The hallway smelled of stale sweat and bleach, and a fluorescent light overhead buzzed with irritating regularity. No one offered him water. No one read him his rights. They just left him there, cuffed, like cargo. Down the hall, he could hear Sarah's voice, sharp and clear, demanding answers and getting nothing but silence in return. After what felt like an eternity, a young officer swaggered to the doorway. It was Riley. He leaned against the frame with a smirk. "So, you're the FBI guy?" he asked like it was the punchline to a joke. Art looked up, his gaze flat and cold. "Special Agent Arthur Coleman, DC Field Office. My credentials are in the glove box of the Ford Explorer you illegally towed." The smirk vanished from Riley's face. He blinked. Why didn't you say that before?" "I did," Art replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "More than once. You weren't listening." The young cop shifted his weight, suddenly looking like a kid in his dad's uniform. Let me go check with someone." He vanished. A few minutes later, Sergeant Miller appeared. His face was a hard, unreadable mask. "You say your badge is in the car?" Art nodded once. "Glove box. Left side. Black leather holder with the bureau seal on the flap." Miller stared at him for a long second, then turned and walked away without a word. The wait was agonizing. 10 minutes stretched into 15. Finally, quick, nervous footsteps echoed down the hall. It was Riley again. This time his face was pale. The bravado was gone, replaced by pure, undiluted fear. They had checked. They had found it. "Agent Coleman, sir?" he stammered, stepping into the hallway as if the floor were mined. We We found your identification. On behalf of the department, I want to apologize. This was all just a miscommunication. Stop, Art said quietly, but with an authority that made Riley flinch. Do not call this a miscommunication. You're insulting my intelligence. And your own. Riley swallowed hard. I'll get those cuffs off you right away. Now you're thinking, Art thought. Minutes later, he was sitting at a metal table, rubbing the circulation back into his wrists, when Sarah was brought in. Her eyes were blazing with fury. They tried to tell me it was a mix-up, she seethed, that they were just doing their job. Their job, huh? Art muttered. That's when a tall man in a cheap suit walked in. Not a uniform. This was the man in charge, Chief Barrows. He sat down, didn't offer a name, and didn't apologize. We've confirmed your identity, he said, his tone as bland as if he were reading a weather report. Art stared back at him. Took you long enough. You have to understand, Agent Coleman, when we get a call from a resident in that neighborhood. No, Art cut him off, his voice dangerously low. I don't have to understand anything. You don't get to blame the caller. This was on your people. My wife told them she had the rental agreement. They threw her phone aside. I told them I was an agent. They put a knee in my back. This is on you. Barrows cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Given the circumstances, I am prepared to drop all charges and waive the tow fee for your vehicle. Charges? Sarah snapped. We didn't commit a crime. You can't waive a fee for a car you had no right to touch. Don't try to buy our silence with waived fees, Chief, Art said, leaning forward. The hunter was awake now. That won't fix what you did in front of my children. So let me explain exactly how this is going to go. First, I want a full incident report, the 911 transcript, and the unedited body cam footage from every officer on that scene on my desk by morning. Include their names and badge numbers. Second, the moment I walk out of here, I'm calling my supervisor, and we are opening a federal inquiry into your department's practices. Third, he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. You have two officers, Miller and Riley, who made a choice tonight. A choice to ignore evidence and escalate force. Their careers are now in your hands. Art stood up, towering over the stunned chief. And one more thing. While you were all in here trying to cover your tracks, my 12-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter have been sitting alone on a dark porch in a town where they just watched their parents get arrested for nothing. You don't just get to move on from that. He and Sarah walked out, leaving the chief speechless in their wake. The ride back was silent. The street was dark now, the neighbors' lights off, their curtains drawn tight. As their Explorer pulled into the driveway, two small figures shot up from the porch steps. Dad! Leo cried, running toward the car as Maya woke with a start. The relief in his son's voice was a gut punch, a painful reminder of the terror they had endured, all because someone decided they didn't belong. Art stepped out of the car and pulled his son into a tight hug. You did good, Leo, he said softly. You looked after your sister. I'm proud of you. Dad, Leo whispered into his shoulder. One of the neighbors. He just stood across the street and watched the whole time. Art looked up at the house with the single porch light still burning. A silhouette moved behind the curtain. The caller. Inside, the scene was frozen in time. Groceries on the counter, a paused cartoon on the TV. Art's eyes landed on the rental agreement sitting in plain sight on the table. His jaw tightened. He walked back out onto the porch and dialed a number he knew by heart. It's Coleman, he said when the line connected. Patch me through to Director Reed's office. I have an incoming civilian complaint against multiple officers in Osprey Cove, North Carolina. I want the body cam footage flagged before it disappears. He paused, his voice turning to ice. No, this isn't work-related. It's personal. They came after my family. Later that night, a soft knock came at the door. It was the young officer, Riley, nervously holding Art's badge holder. I wanted to return this in person, sir, he stammered. I saw the footage from my camera. I'm sorry. Art studied him for a long moment before taking the badge. That's a start, he said, and quietly closed the door. Apologies weren't enough. Not nearly enough. The call came before sunrise. It was Director Evelyn Reed herself, her voice tight with concern. I read your report, Art. It's bad. I know, he said, pacing the damp lawn. Are you ready to take this public? She asked. I'm giving them one chance to do the right thing, Art replied, but I won't wait forever. There was a pause on the other end. All right, she said, but you need to be prepared. It might be too late for that. What do you mean? A neighbor's Ring camera caught the arrest, Art. The footage hit the internet about an hour ago. It's already starting to spread. Art's phone exploded with notifications. The Ring camera footage had 100,000 views before breakfast, and a local news outlet had picked it up. By 10 a.m., the Osprey Cove Police Department issued a pathetic two-sentence statement about reviewing an incident. "They're trying to get ahead of it," Sarah said, disgust thick in her voice. "They can try," Art replied, opening his laptop. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't a cop. It was the neighbor from across the street, Mr. Henderson, looking pale in his golf shirt and khakis. I saw everything," he began stiffly. "Just wanted to say sorry, I guess." Sarah stared at him, her arms crossed. "Was it you? Did you call them?" He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I wasn't sure what was going on. It's a quiet neighborhood." Art stepped up behind his wife, his voice calm but lethal. "Let me get this straight. You saw a family unloading groceries. You heard no shouting, saw no broken windows, and your first instinct was to call in a felony? I I didn't mean for it to go like that." "But it did," Art said, his gaze unwavering. "And you need to live with that." Henderson gave a defeated nod and shuffled back across the street, a coward retreating to his castle. 3 days later, the fight was no longer in a small Carolina town. It was in a press conference room in Washington, D.C., flooded with cameras. Art sat at the long oak table, flanked by attorneys, and leaned into the microphone. "My name is Special Agent Arthur Coleman," he began, his voice commanding silence in the room. "And 3 nights ago, I was thrown to the ground in front of my children because a neighbor decided my family didn't belong. The officers who responded didn't ask questions. They didn't verify our identity. They saw a description, they heard the word suspicious, and they acted like we were a threat." He paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle. "My badge was in the glove box, but that shouldn't matter. It shouldn't take a federal title to be treated like a human being." The video of his arrest passed 1 million views that night. The fallout was no longer something the Osprey Cove PD could manage with a press release. It was a firestorm. 2 weeks later, a grim-faced Chief Barrows stood at another podium and announced the results of the full investigation. Sergeant Miller, the officer who tossed Sarah's phone aside and refused to check the glove box, was fired. Officer Riley, who had shown remorse, received a 90-day suspension without pay and was assigned to mandatory de-escalation retraining. The next day, facing a vote of no confidence from the city council and a federal inquiry, Chief Barrows tendered his resignation. And across the street from the Coleman's vacation rental, a for sale sign went up on Mr. Henderson's perfect lawn. Justice, once delayed, had finally been delivered.